Scott, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well, Joe.
Oh, nice. Why don't you tell the world what it is, your name, and what it is that you do?
So my name's Scott Allen. I've been in the VFX industry for now going on 8 years. Started off with a boutique company in Vancouver called The Embassy Visual Effects. As well, did some work as well for one of their good friends, The Atmosphere VFX. Most recently, I was with Method Studios in Vancouver as well as the technical resource manager, looking after render farm wranglers in Vancouver, Montreal, LA.
Yeah, so I saw you in a lot of the same render and cloud sessions that I was in, and everybody talks about the cloud. That's sort of the first and last thing people want to talk about when they get into SIGGRAPH. At least the folks in our role. What did you see some of the challenges that people were talking about and such about moving from the on-prem just to the cloud, or and maybe the middle stage or the end stage? What are some of the challenges you see people sort of still stuck on in the industry?
Well, I think that the big thing is the people have that there's that sunk cost for if they're big studios and they're looking at it and they're evaluating the cloud. There's that big pool of stuff that they have on prem that they don't want to just like pitch out into the alley, right? So that's the big part. And with it being like that, the workflows are so different. So I think that's sort of where they don't are having the big stumbling block is trying to figure out, how to get to hybrid, and still be a functional studio and then get to all in. It's like we sort of saw that like some of the things about how brand new studios, fairly small, starting off, right? So they have that sort of advantage that they don't have this legacy anything pipeline hardware to start off with. They get to build it fresh.
Yeah, it's one thing I've kind of picked up over the years. I don't think people always take into consideration is how powerful it is to be a very large old studio, like the greats. I mean, the Pixar's, the ILMs. But what they also carry is often a lot of legacy. Not to besmirch these studios' names, they do the best work in the business, but they over the years start to create tie-ins to older technology and ways they've already done things, and it creates a lot of ties that you have to sever or reconnect. I brought up last year in our birds of a feather discussion was also the idea that production has to work very differently. When they have sunk cost procs, they tend to just try to run them at 100% all the time. And when
Mhm.
you're paying for every core hour on the farm, on the
Right.
web, well, or on the internet, now you need to render the least amount possible, and that's a
Right.
hard switch for a lot of studio, creatives to make.
I think that's one of the discussions I think that or part of the discussion that I didn't hear is how people change the business model going forward, right? Because they're how you render, how you bill out those kind of things when everything is a sunk cost already. Aside from time, doing another version doesn't cost anything really that much on the farm aside from electricity. Whereas if you go to the cloud, the 100th version is going to cost you another X number of dollars, and that's going to be a problem. So that transition, I think that might be the biggest stumbling block. The technological hurdles are pretty hard, but how do you transition the business model from something that's possibly like it's going to be X number of dollars for this shot to it's going to be X number of dollars per version of this shot kind of thing.
Another thing that came up that I think you and I can at least hug on is the idea that resource prediction has gotten more difficult. And it's something, again, we talked about last year, the idea that it's so hard to resource predict, meaning how many machines do I need to get this movie done? Um, I'd say that's only gotten more difficult in the last few years, where everyone would expect it to improve with AI and data. It's only got worse. Would you agree that it got harder in the last few years?
I would definitely agree with that. Because the shots have a lot more complexity in them. What was relevant even last year, now there's more layers. Now there's going to be more sims. It's just what the audience I think expects to see is just more realism, which means more time. And yeah, we've also talked about it's going to 4K is now sort of the standard. I've seen it's been 8K in a couple of times. Um, so I think that has really that's one part that makes it harder, obviously, but that's sort of, you know, just math, figuring out the resolutions. The other part of it is more things are going into streaming now because, and that certainly has accelerated in the COVID times where now, you know, people aren't going to movies anymore. They want to see it in the, you know, on their home screen. The difference is that there isn't usually a set delivery date for those episodes or whatever like that. And so in my experience, what has happened is that you have to keep the entire series on disk or rendering. And then sometimes, you know, that's even bigger than a feature. And if, you know, it comes to near the end and they decide they want to change the look of something that goes, and that has to go across all of the episodes, and then you have to redo all of that. That's a huge undertaking. The other part of it too is trying to get sign off on a final version of something doesn't usually stick. I mean, what might happen is, yeah, like you mentioned, it tests, it goes out, the audience doesn't like it, and they come back and they have to redo everything. So things that you may thought were final get reopened again, and they have to come back, or something that was omitted has to come back. So production, yeah, is really reluctant to take something off and archive it because they never know when nowadays if that's going to come back and they need it like right away. So more and more hits it stays on disk, and that just has to become, and it also not just on disk, it's also on T1 disk.
Yes, meaning the highest performant disk.
Right.
E1 disk is a finite resource, and everybody wants to have it there, so they don't have to wait for it to be brought back online. They can hit it right away. And this is with the big budget movies and the big, you know, without again naming any names, the largest, you know, comic book style movies and those sort of fantastic VFX movies. They have a lot of people with opinions who are putting in money, producers. They have these whole VFX Trust, so to speak, where whole teams of folks in the studio will overlook and look over the VFX and then feedback on it 3 months after it's finalized. So it's really made it's made for much better effects. I mean, let's be honest, these movies look fantastic, but it definitely is a lot of extra sweat and blood and tears for
Yeah.
the community that's making it. So, what was the coolest thing you saw at SIGGRAPH this year?
For me, it was actually peeling a little bit behind some of those things that the technology. So the Academy Software Foundation, to see some of the work that went under those open source technologies that seem to be the cornerstone of so much of those pipeline and rendering things that I see every day. So hearing some of the discussion that goes into that and some of the issues and sort of what that roadmap is and getting some more detail about that, that was for me was really, you know, being the tech guy that I am was really the kind of highlight for me.
Yeah, I also enjoy from some other layers. I attended some of those sessions as well, but I enjoy the fact that it's rare, or not rare, but it's harder to find instances where lots of competitors are working together on a solution. You see that a lot in VFX. You see it less on this new world I'm in, on the side of vendors and technology, and you know it's a little more competitive. But still, those same folks that I'm talking about right there are getting into a room and talking about how do we make these tools. And these tools aren't there to replace products that are being sold. They're there to create sort of these standard solutions that everyone can share and then work together better, because VFX studios have to collaborate and they need some common standards. So it's almost become more of a standards body as much as an open source you know, consortium, right? And I just like that because it's nice to see everyone drop all their competitive edges and just really coalesce on an issue that is common, right? It's really big on the VFX side. You know, you can go back and if anyone who was at SIGGRAPH can go back or look up the Open Source Foundation. What is the official name of the?
The Academy Software Foundation.
Thank you. Google them and take a look at some of the projects. I mean, it's very technical. So for those of you who are in VFX or into programming technology, it's really interesting. And oh yes, the other thing is the project management of it all. The fact that there's so many people and so many studios are contributing to working products that are getting pushed out past the 1.0, 2.0 releases. Thank you very much, Scott. I know that you are currently available, so I'll make sure to tag your name down here. If someone wants to talk to Scott, just reach out to him in LinkedIn. And I just appreciate your time, man. You have a great day.
Thank you very much for having me. This is great.